Welcome to Lesson 10, problem number 4, where we are writing the equation of lines based on given information. So the first thing you want to know is that parallel lines are two lines that never intersect. So parallel lines, because they never intersect, they are always going to have, I'm going to write that a little neater, they are always going to have the same slope. They have to have different y-intercepts though, because otherwise, they'd be the same line. So fact number 1, you want to know parallel lines have same slopes. Okay, second thing, perpendicular lines. Remember, perpendicular lines are two lines or more than two lines, but lines that meet to form a right angle. Sometimes you'll see this symbol kind of indicating the right angle. But perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. I'm going to abbreviate opposite and abbreviate reciprocal. But I'm going to show you an example to make sure you know what I mean. So for example, if you had the lines, y equals 3x and y equals negative 1 over 3, do you see how I took the reciprocal and made it the opposite sign? And so these two lines would be perpendicular because they have opposite reciprocal slopes. So that was just an example to make sure you know what I mean by that. But let's now remind ourselves that a really great way to write the equation of a line, at least in my opinion, from years of experience, students that learn to think about this form called point slope form first and then convert it to slope intercept do pretty darn well. Now, you may decide that you prefer to write it directly in to a slope intercept form, and we could do that method as well. But for the sake of the videos, we're going to write it in this form and convert it. But if you want information on doing it another way, please feel free to email me. All right, let's get rolling. All right, so we want to go through the point negative 1, 8. So we know from previous videos that you could always go back to the equation of the line in point slope form is y minus 8 equals, and we're going to take the slope from this line because we want our line to be parallel, meaning having the same slope as that line that's given. So it's y minus 8 equals 1/3, and then it's going to be x plus 1. Notice that I didn't do anything with this line. I'm crossing it out because the only thing I did with that line was use the slope of 1/3. Now we're going to convert it to slope intercept form because currently it's in point slope form. And so all I have to do is say y equals, I'm going to move that negative 8 to the other side in a minute, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to distribute that 1/3. So it's going to be 1/3 x plus, and it's going to be plus 1/3 because of the 1/3 times the 1, but then that 8's also going to be added over. So I'm going to say plus 8 and 1/3, and we're done. Okay, so this would be our final answer for 1A. All the other ones, I spent a lot of time talking through the overall view of these, so now we can kind of roll. Okay, B, we're going to again write it as y plus 7 equals. Now, here we have to make our line perpendicular to this line. So I'm stopping when I get to the slope because I first need to find the slope of the line that we want to be perpendicular to. So I'm going to take the 4x minus 2y equals 7, and I'm going to figure out what the slope of it is. So I'm going to subtract the 4x from both sides, and I get negative 2y equals negative 4x plus 7. Okay, once we do that, now I'm going to divide everything through by negative 2, because then I have this equation, y equals positive 2x plus, let's just make that a minus. I was going to say plus a negative, but it's just easier to say minus 7/2. But all that we really care about, there's only one thing we care about. We care that the slope of the line we want to be perpendicular to has a slope of 2. So our line that we're writing the equation of is going to have a slope of the opposite reciprocal of 2, which is negative 1/2, and then I can continue with the x plus 2. Remember, I used this point, but I used the slope from the other line and made it the opposite reciprocal. Okay, so now I'm going to forget about that 7 for 1 minute, but I know I'm going to subtract it. But I'm first going to distribute that negative 1/2. So y equals negative 1/2 x. And then negative 1/2 times 2 is going to give me a negative 1. but then I'm also going to subtract 7. So my final answer will be -8. Okay, let's go to the next one. All right, remember that the x-axis is this axis is the x-axis. So if we want to go through the point 7, 3 and be parallel to the x-axis, our line has to be y equals 3, because I'm going to draw this out here. Every point on our red line has to be a y value, a y coordinate of 3, because it's a horizontal line if it's parallel to the x-axis, and y is always 3. This is our equation. Go back to the problems earlier in the workbook that talked about writing the equations of lines that are either horizontal or vertical. Okay, same thing here, but this time we want to be perpendicular to the x-axis, and we want to go through the point -5, 9. So this time we're going to be something like this blue line. And now x is always the same, and in this case, x is equal to -5. Okay, let's look at E and F. Now, the long way of doing it is to do the slope. We could do that, and I'm going to do it for the first one, but then I'm going to roll through the next one. If you did the slope, you would have 5 minus 7, so y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. -2 over 0, it's undefined. But the key is that if you have the x repeating at 9, 7, sorry, not right there, over here at 9, 7 and say 9, 5, the line will always have an x equal to 9. So we don't have to do any work with that one, but I wanted you to see how the slope is undefined, and we know that that's a vertical line. But I could also just look at the points and say, hey, the only equation of a line that's going to work here is if x equals 9. Same thing here, except for here, it's going to be y equals 5 because the y value, the y coordinates repeat. Okay, that's it. Great job. See you next time.